Okay, let's look how the... Alright, so here we enter turn 21, 1590 turn. Had a kind of interesting experience where I found, gee, I hadn't uploaded. My camera hides things sometimes, and in this case I had rolled over between, I don't know, the highest number on it, FFF, down to 000, and well, it hid that last video in a different folder from the 0001, so I'm uploading it now. It's just a 7-minute piece. It should have all been in one video. Anyway, but it's easier to handle it this way. So in this case, what did we have to set the stage for this turn? Well, not a lot changed. Some monarchs, though. We had more deaths. I think let's see, we got some great ones here, right? Russia may have had another death after the dynastic crisis. The Dutch. Now, normally having a bunch of 9s for your monarch, like William did, gives you a really good table to roll on. Unfortunately, you can still roll pretty poorly, and this is a little different from Empires in the Middle Ages here because of the flatness of the table. So the Dutch leader ended up being really, really awful. And that's one of the things you start to see in this game. Leaders degenerate. Dynastic crises have a chance of giving you a better leader. But for the most part, the way the table is structured, as a dynasty goes on, the leaders just get worse and worse. And that's fairly historical, but it's also frustrating to see yourself getting a worse and worse leader as you go on. Other events, let's see. Russia has epidemics. Turkey has a rush of colonists they can't use. Spain has a drought. There's also a revolt in Sierra Nevada. Now, this is a special event. The Turks could do some adventuring here and try to sustain that and cost Spain a lot of trouble. In this game, with Spain already struggling and with Turkey not really, and they never have the resources to jump into this, it feels like, it's probably going to be fairly easy for the Spanish to handle, especially since they have Spinola down there. Over, let's see, we got one more, no? Yeah. Take a look. Ah, yes. The closure of China. So again, unlike the historical, in this game it's very unlikely, at least when I play it, for Portugal to actually set up a trading post in China and in Japan. Especially if they want this chain of things going around Africa. That's a valuable thing. That's a valuable network to have. Unfortunately, once you set that up, you don't really have the ability to exploit Asia. So I guess what we're seeing is, even though Portugal did very well victory point wise, they didn't match their historical expansion at all. They failed with Goa. And no one's doing terribly well. The English started their colonization a little early, and you could say they're doing pretty well. And the French are doing pretty well with the addition of Milan and getting the religious wars out of the way early. So I think it's going to come down between the two of them. The Dutch, you could say, wow, they're doing amazing here. Yeah, but I don't know how that's going to compare to not being a potent force in the New World. And this is really the difference, is in this game, the Spanish have an incentive to keep fighting the war, whereas normally in the base game, I think they usually hand the war off and say, hey, you can win it. I'm not sure how big an incentive it is, though. It's forcing Spanish stability way down. Anyway, let's see what we get with diplomacy and the like. There is, as often in this game, no real diplomatic excitement going on. The events are what drive things, and So there's a couple of countries that have some freedom. England, but they have a lot of explorers, and they don't really want to get involved in anything. And France, who is in a very good position to start a war, but they don't have a casus belli, or casus bellum, as the case might be in this case. Picking off a minor, something some players would like to do in this case. And it is a generally a valuable thing to do. So, for example, the French could declare war, I don't know, on some Protestant, perhaps, although there's nothing really within reach of them. So, if they declared war on Lorraine, they wouldn't really gain anything. It cost them 10 victory points, stability, and they'd end up plus a few victory points from it. But that's it. And that's a line that, especially with only $7 to recover, the way I play it, doesn't work. The math works much better if you give, the ability to grab hundreds of dollars in booty. Now, on the other side of this, the more enticing aspect would be a war with a major power. They could certainly go to war with Spain, for example. And there's some attraction to that. But what would they gain? They might get the Franche-Comté, but beyond that, there's nothing they really want. They don't want to start taking Spanish national territory because that'll become a thorn in their side. Spain can always declare war on them as long as they have that. Likewise, they can't go to war with the Dutch because that would mean a war with Spain as well. And there aren't really any other great options. They could go to war with the Habsburgs. But again, it would be Habsburg national territory that's falling. It's kind of yellow line here, which would be problematic. So, speaking of which, let's get another turn before we have another imperial election. There's great disincentive. Actually, wait, no. There's a significant gain in victory points there because it's, I was going to say only 5 to attack a minor. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pick on minors, but without a reason. Spain could do it to the Protestants because they have special abilities there. But there's definitely... See, now here's an option that might work, is an attack on the papacy. That would bring Spain into the war. But at least there's something, if they chose, but at least there's something to gain, a couple of provinces. It would get them closer to Naples. It would be an interesting possibility. I may build up towards that for next turn. Right now, I see no reason. I don't see the French army as being in position to take advantage of it. All right. Well, I guess, and I bought a diplomacy action against Scotland, which England managed to counter. Neither side has a lot of money, and that didn't budge them at all. I guess I go to all that economic crap. All right, through the economic and into the actual rounds, and things look really, really ugly for some countries. Russia, for example, they can't do a thing. They built up their army, not hugely. They spent 15 points on it, but they have no money. They cannot take a single campaign in this game. They're just building it. Hopefully, they can intercept something if it comes near Moscow, or defend Moscow itself. But they're basically just lying there, waiting for Poland to pick over them. And that's one of the things. You'll never see that happen to the miners. They can't be brought to that level, and that's not a level that's just a matter of, if you hadn't built so many armies or whatever. No, it's really actually a level that's brought about because only the major powers have to pay for campaigns. The miners can get away with a simple campaign every action. And only the major powers are affected by this whole stability thing. So, Poland's not even terribly affected by continuing the war, or Persia or whatever. these countries are not damaged by the war going on. They get the same reinforcements, they get the same possible actions. Yes, there's a die roll involved, but they don't face the same kind of restrictions. So there's a certain cadence that comes to a war between great powers. They start off, maybe one gets a big jump on the other, but the other one can hold out and say, I'm going to just keep fighting this and drag you down with me. That's not possible against the miners. The miners will crush you. They don't weaken the way you do. And that's something to keep in mind. Now, obviously, some of the miners are really weak. Anyway, last turn of the 30 Years' War. Nobody's got any real hopes here. The Spanish actually didn't roll for reinforcements on Bavaria. They only did the Habsburgs so that they could give Persia some reinforcements because they've got a leader here, Abbas, who is quite good and should be able to do some hurt on the Turks. Not that the Turks really need to be hurt, but there's no real point to playing around more here. Bavaria's already got a pretty big army. Hoping they have almost no money as well, so they probably can't complete even a campaign against the Incas. Remember, they lost their gold fleet. They couldn't build a new fleet. Their gold fleet's going to get caught again if they send it out. They're pretty sure they're not going to have an admiral even for it. They lost their overseas admiral. So they're wishing they had surrendered to the Dutch. Turkey, not in great shape. They're facing the same issue Russia is, not quite as extreme. France preparing itself. Hey, Spain's this damaged. We are going in against them. You know, we can only gain from this. Spain will not be in good shape, and we'll be able to probably gain a province. And the one we want is Franche-Comté, but we may be doing this by attacking instead the papacy. In some senses, we kind of would have liked to have joined into the 30 Years' War just for cheap thrills, but you can't get anything off the 30 Years' War, so there's not too much point to that. But grabbing this route down to Naples would be really pleasing to the French, I think. Naples is worth something at the end of the game. Some provinces are worth like 10 times their value just at the end of the game because they're important at some point in the game. So they're always going to remain somewhat important. Not a lot of expansion over here in the New World. I don't know if the Spanish wasted money. I think they may have trying to advance one of their things, which would have been foolish. The English increased their Mozambique trade. They're pulling some slaves in. Just all kind of little stuff there. But there's people who really wish they could have gotten in here. The French. Oh, here's where we got. We got a New English settlement over there on Haiti. The French don't really see much value to settle in Quebec. So they tried to go for Newfoundland instead. That didn't work. It's a little harder. The Dutch don't have anywhere they can land. Of course, they've got a couple good explorers this turn. So they're hoping to be able to start doing some colonization and rest of the world type actions. Anyway, on to the rounds. Okay, at the end of the first round here, what do we got? The usual chaos from the 30 Years' War. I mean, we've got people swinging into Bavaria and Erz to siege, but meanwhile, Karl cleared the siege at Thuringia. Wallenstein's still stuck here in the Palatinate, unable to really do anything, and nobody's really budged him. I don't think anybody's really tried too hard. There were some attacks, but anyway, that's kind of a swirling mass of death. The Poles came charging forward. The Turks got beaten. Abbas knocked them out of, well, not defeated, but Abbas knocked them out of Kurdistan, and it's looking like Turkey won't be able to have the extra factors of, say, a successful siege to help them maybe get a white peace out of this. Some of the most interesting stuff, though, is happening down here. First of all, the Spanish got to go first. Well, not out of everybody, but compared to the Dutch, which meant they got their treasure fleet home. That might make this last a little longer. They can hold it out. And I've also probably been cheating against them. This should have been cleared up a long time ago. It's not that I've been forgetting, but I've been adding the wrong numbers together. Armies are worth 4 points each at full strength, and I've been adding them as 2 points and getting some bad die rolls. You know, you live with these things in the game. But we've got English explorers, Cavendish and Hudson going together, thinking about going around the world together. Thinking about circumnavigating. Likewise, though, we've got the Dutch. Hustman and he's quite good. You kind of don't want to risk him on exploring with those good values, 664, but there is not a lot he can do. The Spanish don't really have a navy in place, so other than maybe privateering against colonies, which is just a way to grab money, really. We do have those barons starting up the attacks again. He went and discovered Trinidad so he could launch an attack on that. It was unsuccessful. He's got a whole army, though, there. And he's planning on pretty much trying to take away and make this hurt the Spanish as much as possible. France started moving their forces into Milan, preparing themselves. This is kind of a warning sign. Spain should be looking and saying, wow, this is a problem for me. I don't know how much they're really able to pay attention to that. But anyway, onward. At the end of 2 rounds, the only really significant event, I mean, most of this is just what's happening here anyway. Well, the Protestant army in the south got destroyed. But I wouldn't call that too significant. But the more significant is this Dutch army landed and seized Trinidad here. Not that that is really Trinidad, but the colonies have the names fixed to them, so you can put them in the wrong places, essentially. Other than that, some sieges were partially successful. Like in Cusco, there's a breach. But man, that's just so risky. I hate taking those. So in a lot of cases, that one, let's see, we've got an outstanding breach here, one up here. I just don't want to make the assault because it's just going to weaken the attacker. Usually the assault does not work. If you have really significantly greater tech, as the Spanish do here, they have a chance of succeeding. By the way, talking about tech, I probably left this behind for a moment, but the Chinese, Japan, and India are now up to Renaissance tech in the land section. Not that they have any naval tech at all. So they're going to be a little tougher to deal with. Now, China and Japan usually don't get played with too much, but India could be an issue. And it definitely does, them having firepower gives them a significant edge. Another round down. Not much happening here. Just continuation on the exploration. You have to turn back down to 1 ship. Over here, the Spaniards, Alba, finally launched his attack into the Netherlands, and he was repulsed. No big deal there. Here, bounced the Swedes out. Wallenstein managed to capture Frankfurt. And likewise, the Saxons managed to take Urs. Too late now. They can't save Bohemia. It's gone. The Turks were defeated down here, and Abbas has a siege of Aleppo, and the Turkish army is destroyed. That was a major victory for Abbas. Let's harass the Turks some more with these guys. And the Poles have grabbed Kazan, and are going to continue their march into Russia, try to grab as many points as they can from that. Well, that ends the 4th round, and that ends the turn. Got a bad roll there at the end of it. Exploration-wise, the Dutch have pushed out here into the Atlantic, but they were down to, I think, 2 ships, so it was time for Hustman to return home. The question is, do the English want to stay out here? They've rounded the Cape. I think the answer is actually yes. They have some good leaders and a good chance of making the circumnavigation. It's a heavy commitment, though, of their ships. They're going to probably have to withdraw Grenville and pull him in to do exploration in a different direction. What else do we have? The Dutch captured another one of the Spanish islands. The Spanish have failed to take Cusco. However, they probably won't have to leave. Down here, the 30 Years' War is indecisive. I mean, there's no question. There was some maneuvering at the end, but it's not going to mean anything. Poles pushed forward into Tula, took Smolensk. Russia really wants out of this. In fact, they may have to pay to get out of it. They may have to go for at least a 5 victory point thing. I don't remember if they were at 2 minuses. I don't think so. this is a painful turn for them, but the next turn may be just as bad, and they may be suffering longer in order to lose just as much, or maybe they want to cut their losses. That's kind of the feeling I have with Spain, too. Maybe they want to cut their losses. This is a bad turn for them because they lost 2 colonies back there. But they're only going to lose, at worst, a piece of level 5, right? And that's probably going to be the Dutch territories here. The Dutch probably aren't too interested in grabbing those colonies at this point. Who knows? Colonies are valuable, but having a nice, coherent country with that big percentage on their manufacturing would be great. So this is kind of appealing to them. Spanish attacks by Alba haven't been successful. And, well, Persians didn't manage to break through. Basically, 4th round I should have been considering. A couple of people, again, passed on making assaults. But, you know, so far I haven't seen an assault win, especially against a level 2 fortress. So it's kind of tough to do that. All right, I'll come back after we resolve the pieces and whatnot. Well, we move into the 1599 turn. Turn 30 or 22. That's getting close. Let's see. The batteries are available, and I should have dropped them by 1. Muskets come available in 1600. You can see the Dutch Navy is almost up to batteries. Anyway, big stuff happened. First of all, 30 Years' War. Ended in pretty much the historical state. Swedes got 3 quick provinces off the Hanseatic League. Hanseatic League still exists. It need not. In fact, it's kind of weird because historically Prussia wasn't really involved in the war, and they only get this if they're involved, and the Danes weren't involved at the end, and by the Risto events they only get Mecklenburg if they're involved at the end. So the Hanseatic League survives unless a lot of the big players stay in, and that's a little quirky. I don't think that's the case in the original rules. I seem to remember those things get grabbed anyway, but I may be mistaken there. Russia, they didn't even try to surrender to Poland. The only thing they could have succeeded with was an unconditional, I think. I think they could go to a level 4 on like an 8 or a 9 or something like that. Turks made an attempt at a level 4 treaty with Persia, figuring we can give back the things we got, Armenia and Georgia. We don't want to be losing a lot of money in addition to that. They didn't get that, so they're going to be continuing their war. Otherwise, we're pretty much at status quo here. One major exception, because the Palatinate didn't fall, they still hold their electorate. So it's not quite historical in that either, but that's fine. I'm very happy with the way that works out. The other big one is that Spain had an enforced surrender to, they got to get out of the Incas too. Yeah. They have an enforced surrender to the Dutch, and indeed they lost all the Dutch provinces, or all the Burgundian provinces that they still held. The only thing that actually Franche-Comté they still hold. That's the only thing they have. I've got to clear those Dutch forts and troops out of there, and they've got to make their way home. And likewise, the Spanish have to get out of the Incan Empire. They failed. The country collapsed essentially due to this war. Pushed them into that place. Point-wise, ugly, ugly, ugly situation. And you start to look, England's at 265, great. Russia 516, but we're pretty sure they're not going anywhere. They're in this stall, and we've seen that before. Spain's down at 24, no big threat. France at 162. France can be scary. There's no question there. So people have to keep an eye on them. But the really scary one to me, Turkey at 139 is no big issue. The scary one to me is the Venice at 396. They're ahead of England right now, and they are England's target. England's got to strip some of their power away from them, most specifically working on the Atlantic trade zone. But there may start being some wars between the English and the Dutch just to try and grind them down. War isn't necessarily the best way, though, to hurt someone. And the English do have the advantage of having gotten into a better position in the rest of the world at this point. We'll see. The Dutch may be able to make that up. They have a conquistador, a very good one actually, at this point, in Kuan. And hey, they might be able to take the Incas on, for all I can see. That's a pretty decent conquistador. Of course, Cuzco itself has 2 strikes against it, so it may not be worth it. Gold, it's kind of tough if you split the gold, because there's times when you're going to be paying significantly more than the other players if you hauled gold home. Anyway, this one's going up, but this is really a major point in the game, the end of a big era. Religious conflicts aren't going to be as big anymore. The penalties for dealing with Protestant Catholic become much less. A lot of things just fall to the wayside at this point. And it's kind of interesting, I've seen this happen before, where everything happens early, and there's kind of no events to happen later, and it's hard to bring yourself to go to war without events, especially without a casus belli. And that's one of the problems. Peace sort of settles into Europe in a way. Yes, historically, Peace of Westphalia did quell things quite a bit, but in a way that is more extreme because it lasts a longer period. Anyway, up this goes before I run out of it.